Hello, and welcome to the Spicy Pod Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight we'll step onto an island where desire lingers in every shadow, and every glance hides a dangerous promise. She came seeking a quiet escape, but she didn't expect to find him. Dark, magnetic, and impossible to resist. One touch becomes a whisper, one kiss a temptation that cannot be denied. As the nights pass, the heat between them grows, stolen moments becoming an affair that neither wants to end. And when the week is over, the island isn't ready to let them go. The first thing she noticed was the stillness. Not silence exactly, for the sea never ceased its restless song, but a kind of quiet that wrapped around her like silk, soft and heavy at once. As the sleek boat slowed, the island came into view, a crescent of white sanded dark palms rising high, and a villa of pale stone that gleamed against the late afternoon sky. She stepped onto the dock and let her heels click against the wood. The breeze curled through her hair, carrying the scent of salt and hibiscus, an intoxicating mix that was nothing like the city she had left behind. For 7 days, she told herself, this would be her refuge, a place where the demands of her life could not follow, where her phone would remain buried in a drawer, where the world could forget her, and she could forget the world. The villa was everything the glossy photographs had promised. Sprawling terraces, open doors that let the ocean breathe through the rooms, linen curtains that drifted like ghosts in the warm wind. Staff moved quietly, their smiles soft, their words practiced, as though they belonged to the island in the same way the sand and surf did. It was paradise, carefully constructed, and yet she wasn't alone. He was there, standing at the far edge of the terrace, as though he had risen out of the ocean itself, his frame cast in shadow by the sinking sun, tall, still, with the kind of presence that filled the air without requiring words. His gaze was unreadable, and yet it pressed against her skin in a way that made her pulse stumble. She looked away first. She told herself she should not want to look again, and yet she did. That single glance was enough to unsteady her. This was supposed to be escape. Instead, the island felt like the beginning of something she had not been prepared to face. Night on the island arrived slowly, with a lingering glow across the horizon before darkness settled in. She unpacked with unhurried care, running her fingers over cool linen sheets, sliding the glass balcony doors open until the sound of the waves filled the room. From her vantage point, the sea was endless, black velvet stitched with the shimmer of moonlight. She closed her eyes and breathed it in. She should have felt calm. She didn't. Not when her thoughts kept circling back to him. The man on the terrace. The stranger who had unsettled her in silence. Dinner was set on the villa's wide veranda. Lanterns flickered in the humid air, flames bending whenever the ocean breeze slipped between the pillars. A long table gleamed with glass and silver, fruit arranged in careful towers, wine already poured in slender goblets. She chose a seat near the end, deliberately distant, hoping for quiet. But then he entered. There was nothing hurried in his movements. He walked as though every step belonged exactly where it fell, his presence unhurried but undeniable. Conversation around her softened, as though those near him instinctively adjusted to his pace. When he sat across the table, the space between them, only a scatter of candles and polished silver, felt suddenly too narrow. She tried to focus on the meal, on the curve of mango on her plate, on the sweetness of wine that clung to her tongue. But every time her eyes strayed upward, she found his waiting, not for long, never enough to be bold, but long enough that heat stirred low in her chest. They spoke, eventually, polite courtesies, where she had come from, how long she had been traveling. His voice was lower than she expected, steady and rich, carrying weight even in the simplest phrases. She answered carefully, measured, unwilling to let more of herself slip than she intended. Yet with each word, the silence that followed seemed heavier, more charged. She told herself it was nothing, that the ocean's rhythm, the heavy warmth of the island night, was playing tricks on her body, pulling her into a tide that wasn't real. And yet, when she finally dared meet his gaze head on, it was like striking flint against stone. A spark, quick, dangerous, impossible to ignore. The ocean stretched endless beyond the balcony, a black horizon without borders. But across the candlelit table, she felt a current stronger than the tide pulling her steadily closer, as though there was no ocean at all, only the dangerous, undeniable space between them. The evening should have ended with dinner. She had told herself she would retreat early, close her balcony doors against the night, and let the sea sing her to sleep. But something restless lingered beneath her skin, a hum she could neither name nor ignore. The villa was alive in the dark, its gardens heavy with the perfume of night-blooming flowers. She found herself drawn there almost without thought, slipping into the paths lit by low lanterns and pale fragments of moonlight. The air was warm, humid, thick enough to cling. Each breath carried the sweetness of hibiscus, the spice of orchids, the sharp green of palm fronds, stirred by a hidden wind. She walked slowly, fingertips brushing against the cool stone walls, trailing through leaves that bent at her touch. It should have been solitude, and yet he was there. She noticed him before she saw him fully, the quiet sound of footsteps behind her, steady and unhurried, matching her own. When she turned, the lantern glow caught him in fragments. Broad shoulders, the cut of his jaw, the dark intensity of his eyes made softer by shadow. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, not empty but charged, threaded with something unspoken. "You couldn't sleep either," he said at last, voice low, carrying easily in the heavy air. Her lips parted, but no quick answer came. She gave only the smallest nod, her pulse betraying her calm exterior. He did not move closer, yet the narrow garden path made the space between them feel fragile, as though one breath could close it entirely. They walked together, not side by side, but near enough that the awareness of him wrapped around her like heat. His hand brushed a branch aside, his sleeve shifting near her own. Once, just once, the back of his hand almost grazed hers. The faintest whisper of contact, so light it could have been imagined, and yet it sent a ripple through her, a pull that left her breath caught in her throat. "Strange place," she murmured, eyes fixed on the dark leaves ahead, as if the shadows themselves might answer her. "Beautiful, but strange." His gaze lingered on her. She could feel it without turning. "It reveals things," he said simply, as though the island itself had a will, a secret it intended to show them. The words stayed with her, sinking deep, even as the path curved and opened to a small clearing. Lantern light trembled across a fountain, the water glinting like fragments of glass in the night. She stopped there, uncertain why, and felt the weight of him come to a halt just behind her. The garden held its breath. So did she, every detail sharpened. The warmth of the night, the faint hiss of water falling into the basin, the almost touch of him at her side. If she turned, if she let herself look up into his eyes, she knew something would shift, something that could not easily be undone. Instead, she stood still, letting the moment stretch thin as glass. The air between them pulsed with restraint, with temptation held in check. Her skin prickled with the awareness of it, of him, of the quiet magnetism pulling them nearer and nearer. And though not a single word was spoken, she knew this was no ordinary night, and he was no ordinary stranger. The shadows around them seemed to deepen, as though the island itself understood the danger of what was beginning. The villa had fallen silent. The staff had long since retreated to their quarters. The gardens were empty, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore, and the occasional rustle of palm fronds in the night wind. She had slipped from her room, drawn by the moonlight and the whisper of water, to the villa's pool that glimmered like a dark mirror under the stars. She waded in slowly, letting the cool surface ripple around her ankles, then calves, until the water embraced her entirely. Her hair floated around her shoulders, and for a moment the world was only the quiet pull of the liquid beneath her, the silvered sky above, and the solitude she had sought. But she was not alone. At first she sensed him more than she saw him, a shadow at the far end of the pool, a disturbance in the still night. a presence she could not ignore. Her pulse quickened, subtle but insistent, as her mind replayed the evenings before. The terrace at sunset, the garden at dusk. The distance between them had always been measured, careful, restrained, and yet now, under the muted light of the moon, that distance felt impossibly small. "You're awake," he said softly, stepping into the shallow edge, water lapping around the cuffs of his trousers. His eyes caught the moonlight, sharp and dark, but softened by shadow. She swallowed, uncertain whether to respond. "I could say the same about you," she whispered, though her voice carried more heat than she intended. He did not answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he moved closer, the water parting in subtle arcs around him. The space between them felt charged, electric. Every ripple, every shift of moonlight across his face seemed magnified, impossible to ignore. "Why are you here?" she asked finally, her tone lighter than she felt, though her chest pressed forward with unspoken anticipation. "Why not?" he countered, voice low, intimate, as if even the question itself were a provocation. The pool seemed smaller suddenly, containing only the two of them, the night pressing close. Her arms crossed instinctively across her chest, not out of modesty, but because every instinct screamed awareness of him. And yet, when he extended a hand, fingertips just brushing the water near hers, a current passed between them far stronger than the gentle waves. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the sensation spread through her. It was not fear, not entirely, but a delicious, dangerous tension she had never felt before. Every heartbeat, every inhale seemed to echo across the water in the silence that stretched and throbbed with possibility. He was there beside her, silent, watching, and then, without prelude, he moved closer. The water swirled around them, a dark, fluid cocoon that left nothing to the world outside. She could feel the heat of him, even through the cool pool, a friction born not from touch but proximity, a magnetic pull neither could resist. She opened her eyes. He was near enough now that she could see the fine line of his jaw, the shadow of his lashes across his cheek. And though neither spoke, they both knew the moment was shifting, the quiet tension threading into something sharper, more alive. The ocean hummed in the distance, the stars mirrored on the water's surface, and between them, the current was undeniable, silent, dangerous, intoxicating. The night had become their world. Rain fell in thick sheets, hammering against the villa's wide windows with a force that made the walls vibrate. The ocean roared in response, waves breaking with a deafening insistence, wind howling through the palms as if the island itself were alive and furious. She had just settled with a book, a glass of wine resting untouched at her side. When the first flash of lightning cut across the sky, followed by a crack of thunder that shook the room, and then the lights flickered and the villa was plunged into shadows, her heart leapt. Alone, she would have lit candles and laughed at her own nerves. But she was not alone. He appeared in the doorway, a silhouette against the storm, drenched from the rain that had found its way through the open terrace. His hair was damp, dark strands clinging to the edge of his forehead, and the shirt he wore clung to the line of his shoulders and chest. For a moment she could only look, caught between irritation at his sudden intrusion and something more primal that had nothing to do with reason. "The storm," he said, voice low, as though sharing a secret. "It doesn't seem likely to end soon. You shouldn't be out here alone." She rose, setting the book aside. "I'm fine," she said, though the uneven catch in her voice betrayed her calm. "The storm is beautiful." His eyes followed her, dark and assessing. Beautiful, yes. Dangerous too. And in that single sentence, the air between them shifted. She was aware of every inch of space, every subtle movement, every heartbeat that drew them closer. Lightning streaked the sky again, illuminating the contours of his face, the tension in his jaw, the way his chest rose beneath the wet fabric. "Then stay here," she said, finally, as though saying it aloud could keep her steady. He stepped fully into the room, close enough that the faint scent of rain and something darker, wood smoke and sea salt, reached her. The silence that fell was heavy, expectant. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, it was the stillness between them that thundered. "You shouldn't tempt me," he murmured, and the words brushed against her like the edge of a promise. "I'm not," she countered softly, though her pulse betrayed her. Her hands itched to brush against the damp fabric at his sleeve, to feel the warmth that radiated from him, to test the line neither of them had yet dared to cross. He moved closer, each step measured, deliberate, the storm outside echoing the rising tension in the room. Their shoulders brushed once fleetingly, but enough to send shivers down her spine. Another step, another brush, until it was impossible to tell where she ended and he began. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the villa in stark white light. In that brief moment, their eyes locked and words fell away. She felt the pull, magnetic, inevitable, drawing them into a space where reason no longer held sway. The storm made it easier to forget caution. The storm made it impossible to resist proximity. And when the first touch came, his hand at her waist, steady, claiming, she shivered, leaning into him, letting the tempest outside mirror the storm within. The villa faded around them, the rain, the thunder, the wind. None of it mattered, only the heat, the nearness, the tension coiling tight between them. One small motion, One brush of lips so close they could taste each other's breath, and the world narrowed to the press of skin and the dangerous promise of what might come next. They were trapped together, yes, but in that trap was freedom, the freedom to surrender, if only for a moment, to the force that had been building since the moment she had stepped onto the island. And neither of them wanted to escape. The island's staff had arranged a private celebration for the few guests who remained, a small gathering beneath the open sky, torches flickering along the perimeter, music weaving through the humid night air. The scent of roasted spices and tropical flowers mingled with the warmth of the firelight, painting the terrace in gold and shadow. She arrived in a flowing dress that swayed with her every step, its fabric catching the light and brushing just above her ankles. The breeze carried whispers of the ocean behind her, a soft reminder that they were still on this isolated, sun-kissed island, far from any expectation or restraint. He was already there, leaning against a dark wooden railing, arms crossed, watching. The firelight kissed the angles of his face, highlighting the line of his jaw and the intensity in his eyes. She felt a familiar tug in her chest, a pull that had grown stronger with each shared glance, each stolen moment since the day she had arrived. As the music shifted, slow and lilting, he moved toward her, steps measured, deliberate. "May I?" he asked, voice almost teasing, and extended a hand. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and firmness beneath her fingertips, and allowed him to draw her closer. The space between them seemed to vanish as the first notes of the dance swelled around them. He guided her with ease, their movements synchronized without effort. Every brush of his hand against her back, the subtle tilt of his hips, the way he held her in rhythm with the music, it was intoxicating. She could feel the pulse of his heartbeat through the heat of his chest, a silent drum that matched the tension coiling within her. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The language of the dance, the closeness, the firelight flickering across their bodies, said everything. Her senses sharpened, the scent of his cologne mingling with the smoke from the torches, the brush of his hand against hers, the warmth radiating from him as they moved together. For a moment, she let herself get lost in the rhythm, in the heat, in the careful intimacy of the dance. The rest of the world, the villa, the storm earlier, the ocean, fell away. All that remained was this perfect balance of touch and anticipation, of space and closeness, of restraint and temptation. A sudden laugh from a nearby guest pulled her back for just a heartbeat. She glanced toward the tables, the other guests, and then returned her attention to him. His gaze caught hers, sharp, intimate, daring. It was as if the firelight alone could not contain the electricity between them. "Careful," he murmured softly, his lips brushing her ear in passing, a whisper of warmth that sent shivers down her spine. We might forget the world exists entirely. She smiled faintly, leaning into his chest, the music carrying them forward. The night pressed close, thick and fragrant, and with every step, every turn, every subtle brush of hands, the tension between them tightened. The dance ended too soon, but neither of them moved away immediately. They lingered in the afterglow, toes still brushing on the warm stone, eyes locked, breathing uneven. The firelight flickered across their faces, shadows shifting, and for a moment nothing else existed, just the unspoken pull, the desire they had barely begun to acknowledge. And she knew with certainty that the island had become far more dangerous than any storm. The morning began with sunlight spilling through the villa's windows, warm and deceptive. Outside, the island gleamed, calm and perfect. Inside, the air between them was anything but. It had started with a disagreement, a small irritation over plans for the day, that quickly spiraled into sharper words neither intended but neither could retract. She had argued with more fire than she realized she possessed, and he had matched her tone, calm but cutting, each statement carrying an edge that made her chest tighten. "Why do you insist on complicating things?" he asked finally, eyes dark, tension coiled in the line of his jaw. "I'm not complicating anything," she shot back, voice trembling in ways she did not allow herself to show. "I'm just trying to be honest." His gaze held hers, unflinching, and she felt her defenses crack. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, heat and awareness mingling, and her breath hitched. "Honest," he repeated, almost to himself, "or reckless?" The question hung between them, sharp, tantalizing, and for reasons she could not name. It made her pulse quicken. The argument faded, dissipating into a charged silence, one that neither of them wanted to break, yet could not ignore. Then, almost without warning, he stepped closer. The space that had been measured and careful collapsed entirely. She could feel the warmth of him, even through the thin fabric of her dress, the brush of his arm, a deliberate, calculated pressure against her own. "You don't understand," he murmured, threaded with something she had only felt in fleeting glances and stolen touches. "I've held back for too long." Her heart stuttered, caught between warning and longing. She could feel it too, the pull, the tension that had been building since the moment she arrived on the island. It had been subtle at first, then impossible to ignore, and now it surged like the tide beyond the villa walls. And then he closed the final gap. His hand rose to her face, fingers brushing hair from her temple, thumb grazing her cheek. The touch was electric, intimate, deliberate, a claim and a question all at once. Her eyes fluttered closed at the contact, breath shallow, every nerve alight with anticipation. The kiss came slowly, at first tentative, exploratory, a feather-light pressure of lips that drew a shiver from her. Then it deepened, full of restraint and hunger all at once. A slow burn that pressed her against him without force, claiming and giving in the same motion. Every brush of his lips against hers, every sigh she couldn't suppress, sent waves of heat through her body. The world outside, the villa, the island, the ocean, vanished entirely, leaving only the two of them. The press of skin and breath, the tension finally given voice. His hand slipped to the small of her back, guiding her closer, and she responded instinctively, tilting into him, tasting, feeling, surrendering to the pull she had fought for days. The kiss was hungry, yet careful, full of the promise of more, leaving a trail of fire across her lips and down her spine. When they finally parted, it was only slightly, just enough to breathe, but the charge lingered. Her lips tingled from the contact, her chest heaving, and he remained close, forehead resting against hers, eyes dark, a smile that was half triumph, half desire playing at his mouth. "You've crossed the line," she whispered, breathless, though the words were nothing more than a tease. "No," he countered, voice low and rough. "We've just begun." The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the island washed in sunlight and scent of wet earth. Yet inside the villa, the air between them was anything but clear. The argument, the kiss, it had left them both raw, aware of a pull neither could name fully, yet neither could resist. She had tried to focus on breakfast, on the quiet of the morning terrace, on anything other than the memory of his lips against hers. But he had appeared again, moving with a calm precision, eyes dark and intent, holding her gaze longer than politeness allowed. There was no apology in his expression, no pretense of restraint, only a force that pulled her toward him with undeniable gravity. "You shouldn't tempt me," he said, voice carrying both warning and something more intimate. "I'm not," she whispered, though her pulse betrayed her. Her fingers itched to touch, to feel the warmth she had tasted only moments before, to explore the tension that had been simmering since her arrival. He stepped closer, the space between them collapsing until the heat of him brushed against her own. The villa's balcony offered a view of the ocean, calm now, but she barely noticed. All that mattered was him and the storm that had shifted from outside to within them. This time, there was no hesitation. His hands curved around her waist, pulling her gently yet insistently, drawing her into a closeness that left no space for restraint. She leaned into him, heart racing, aware of the slow, deliberate pull of his body against hers. Their lips met again, more urgently than before. This kiss was layered, beginning with the soft press of lips, then deepening with a deliberate hunger that left them both breathless. She felt the press of his chest against her, the gentle, calculated pressure of his hands tracing her curves over the thin fabric of her dress. Every movement was intimate, charged, but careful, never crossing beyond a teasing, electrifying boundary. He broke the kiss only to rest his forehead against hers, breathing mingling, eyes closed, both of them suspended in a private, heated silence. She felt the warmth radiating from him, the way his body pressed close, how every brush of skin sent tremors down her spine. There was a gravity here, a magnetism that pulled at her senses in ways she had never imagined. Then he leaned down again, lips brushing her jawline, trailing soft, teasing paths to the curve of her neck. She shivered, instinctively tilting her head to give him more access, letting the tension coil tighter. His hand slid upward, framing her face, holding her steady as the kiss deepened once more, every press of lips and brush of hands a conversation in heat and restraint. Time seemed to fold in on itself. The villa, the terrace, even the ocean beyond became background to the electricity between them. She felt a slow, delicious unraveling inside her, a surrender to the pull that had begun the moment she stepped onto the island. And though neither of them spoke, each motion, each sigh, each heartbeat communicated 1,000 unspoken confessions. When they finally parted again, it was with shared breaths, foreheads still resting together, eyes dark with promise. Neither needed to speak. The energy lingered between them, palpable, charged, impossible to ignore. "I shouldn't," she started, but he silenced her with a soft, teasing brush of lips against hers once more. "No," he whispered, low and rough. "You shouldn't. And yet, here you are." For the first time, she realized that resisting him was no longer an option. Not here, not now, not on this island where every glance, every touch, every whispered word pulled them closer to a surrender they both had been aching toward. The villa had fallen into silence, the kind of quiet that made every footstep, every breath feel amplified. Outside, the ocean whispered under the moonlight, waves tumbling softly against the shore. Inside, the heat was their own, deliberate and electric. She had followed him through the wide open doors to a room bathed in shadows and the soft glow of lanterns. The space felt smaller somehow, warmer, as if the world had been compressed to contain only them. He closed the door behind them, and the island, the ocean, even the night itself seemed to fall away. He reached for her, hands brushing first against her shoulders, then the small of her back, pulling her closer. The touch was gentle but insistent, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. Every movement was measured, deliberate, a dance they had been rehearsing with glances and stolen touches for days. Their lips met, soft at first, teasing, testing. She felt the slow burn ignite instantly, a warmth that coursed through her chest and spread in a delicious, uncontainable wave. He tilted her gently toward him, hands threading through her hair as the kiss deepened, lingering on the curve of her mouth. She pressed closer, feeling the heat of him, the quiet strength in his body, the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. He drew back just enough to let his forehead rest against hers, breaths mingling, eyes dark with unspoken promises. The air between them trembled with anticipation, each inhale and exhale a rhythm, a language all their own. Then, lips met again, harder, hungrier, but always restrained, teasing the edges of surrender without crossing into words. Hands roamed in careful, intimate arcs over shoulders, along arms, the gentle press of palms tracing curves beneath light fabric. Her own hands found him, memorizing the feel of him, the heat, the strength, the subtle tension coiling beneath every brush of skin. Time became elastic, folding in on itself. Moments stretched and contracted in the magnetic pull of proximity. They moved together through the space, bodies brushing, shifting, leaning, folding into one another without words. Every laughless gasp, every stolen sigh, every shiver spoke more than language could convey. The night became a world of subtle explorations. Hair tangled, fingertips pressing, whispered names that sounded like confessions in the dim glow. At some point, she let herself melt against him completely. The warmth of his chest beneath her cheek, his hand at the small of her back, anchoring her in the moment. He trailed lips along her jaw, along the line of her neck, teasing the edges of her awareness. And she responded instinctively, heart racing, pulse stuttering, senses alight. They finally paused, foreheads pressed together, breaths heavy, smiles ghosting at the corners of their mouths. The night had been spent discovering and teasing, surrendering and holding back, a dance of desire that left both of them flushed and utterly consumed. In the nights that followed, they continued to steal these moments. Silent swims beneath the stars, whispered touches in dark corners of the villa, glances that carried entire conversations. Each night became a rhythm, a private world they shared, electric and intimate, a secret affair neither wanted to end. And yet, in the quiet of the villa, with the moonlight painting silver across the walls, it was that first night together, the closeness, the heat, the surrender to each other, that would linger in memory, a current neither could ignore, shaping every glance and touch in the days to come. The last morning on the island arrived too quickly, sunlight spilling across the villa and sparkling on the water beyond. She moved through the rooms with a quiet awareness, each step carrying the weight of the days behind her. The stolen glances, the nights beneath the stars, the slow, electric tension that had built from the first dinner, to the storm, to the secret moments they had shared. Packing felt heavier than it should have. Clothes folded neatly in the suitcase seemed insufficient to hold the memories, the warmth, the quiet heat of his presence that still lingered in the corners of every room. She paused at the terrace, letting the ocean breeze stir her hair and wash over her one last time, inhaling the scent of salt and hibiscus and something distinctly him, still faint in the air. He appeared behind her, quiet as always, leaning lightly against the railing, eyes on the horizon. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was not awkward, it was filled with the echo of everything that had passed between them. "You're leaving," he said at last, voice steady, carrying the gravity that had always made her pulse quicken. "Yes," she replied softly, though her tone lacked the certainty she would have preferred. "I leave tomorrow." He turned to face her fully, sunlight glinting in his eyes, and for a moment the island seemed to hold its breath. "And what of us?" he asked, the question hanging in the air, unspoken, yet heavy with expectation. She swallowed, feeling the pull of the past nights, the closeness they had shared. "It was more than I expected," she said, voice quiet, honest. "But it was meant to be here, wasn't it? Just for this time, this place." He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking, until the heat of his body brushed against hers, a reminder of all the nights they had spent discovering one another. "It doesn't have to be just here," he murmured, his hand brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was soft, intimate, and charged with all the promise they had cultivated silently over the week. Her heart stuttered. "It's dangerous," she whispered, aware of the weight in those words. Outside the island, it could change everything. "Perhaps," he admitted, voice low, eyes dark with intensity. "Or perhaps it could be something else entirely. Something worth the risk." They stood close, sharing a silence thick with unspoken possibility. She could feel the pull, the current that had carried them through stolen kisses, moonlit swims, whispered touches, and nights spent surrendering to the tension that had been simmering since the moment she arrived. And though the villa, the island, the week itself was ending, the connection remained, stronger, undeniable and tempting in ways neither could ignore. He leaned down, lips brushing hers lightly, a soft, teasing kiss that carried all the promise of what had come before and what could still be. It was not a goodbye, not really. It was a hint, a challenge, a whisper of the depth of feeling that had grown between them in secret. She rested her forehead against his, breath mingling, pulse racing, savoring the moment that stretched just long enough to imprint itself on her memory. Outside, the ocean glimmered, waves rolling steadily toward the shore. But inside, time had slowed, capturing all the heat, all the longing, all the secret joy of the week. When she finally stepped back, it was with a quiet smile and a sense of anticipation. The affair had been theirs alone, a private world of stolen moments, passion restrained yet undeniable. And now, with the island fading behind her, the story was not over. It was only evolving. The possibility of more lingering in the warmth of his gaze, the brush of his hand, and the quiet promise of what was yet to come. The ocean stretched beyond the horizon, endless, wild, and full of possibility. So, too, were they. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.